Roger says, real communication occurs and the evaluative tendency avoided when we listen with understanding. Now, the evaluative tendency he's talking about is, well, let's simplify this a little bit. Let's say I'm radically left-wing and I'm talking to someone who's radically right-wing, and we start talking about something like income distribution. And the right-wing person says, well, let's say the left-wing person says, well, there's all these people at the bottom and they don't have a lot of money, and a lot of the reason that they're there is because, you know, they've encountered very, very harsh circumstances, or maybe they have an illness or something like that, and you know, there's a real distribution of intelligence, and so lots of times people are at the bottom because they just don't have the cognitive resources to climb, and the right-winger goes, rubbish, rubbish. The reason that they're at the bottom is because, you know, they don't work hard enough and they don't take any care with their long-term thinking. And so the left-winger says, well, that's just prejudice, and the right-winger says, well, you're just a bleeding heart liberal, and poof, that's the end of the conversation. And that's the evaluative tendency. It's like you just come away the same as you were when you entered the conversation. There's been no exchange of information whatsoever. All there's been is a hardening of prejudice, and you can walk away feeling morally superior because, you know, you demonstrated what a scumrat your opponent is and how morally upright you are. Well, that's the evaluative tendency. That's not a conversation that's going to lead to progress. If anything, it's going to lead to like increased feelings of prideful arrogance on your part because you know everything, and on their part too, and like increased polarization. It's not a helpful way of communicating. You know, and this sort of thing, as we'll see, when we move into the more social and political consequences of failure to communicate, it's like that's a microcosm of what goes wrong in a society when it really starts to fall apart. You know, when the individuals within the society who have differing viewpoints can no longer communicate, the whole society shakes and trembles. And you can think about this from a democratic perspective too, because you might say, well, what's the purpose of elections? Well, people who are aligned with a particular ideology think, well, we need to win the election because our viewpoint is right. But then you might ask yourself, well, why are there these other viewpoints? And why do things go so bad when one viewpoint dominates so heavily that everyone who has the other viewpoint, you know, gets shot? That seems like a bad thing. So what exactly is going on in a democratic state? And what's going on is that there's all these different viewpoints, and a lot of them are temperamentally informed. So we know, for example, that liberals are higher in openness and lower in conscientiousness than conservatives. And so the conservatives are conscientious, but they're not very creative and open. So they're good at running things. They're really good at running. They're good at being managers and administrators, for example. But they're not very good at being innovative. The liberals are good at being innovative because they're open, but they're not very conscientious. So like, and that they have to be less conscientious in some ways if they're going to be creative, because conscientiousness can constrain creativity. And so for the society to work properly, the people with the liberal temperament and the conservative temperament have to interact with each other, because the liberals think up all the new companies and the conservatives run them. So, and then in the political state per se, it's like conscientiousness is a virtue. Although if it's exaggerated too much, especially the orderly part, then it can become tyranny. And openness is a virtue too, but you don't want every bloody thing changing every second. So there's got to be some constant negotiated peace between order and innovation. And the way that that happens is that the two sides communicate. It isn't that one side wins or the other side wins. It's that the dialogue stays open so that the viewpoints can be represented properly, and so that as the environment moves, because sometimes maybe the environment is such that being conscientious is going to be better, and sometimes it's going to be, the environment has moved so that openness is going to be better, because the environment moves. The conversation has to track those movements so the society stays healthy across time.